Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us here at the third of Jeff's trilogy of really fascinating stories around not the art of cyber war, but this is our webinar series, the art of cyber war. How are you, Jeff? You well?
I'm good, thanks. Yes, how are you?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. Not bad at all. What I wanted to do before I actually hand over to Jeff, which of course he is the main event here, I just wanted to really quickly just bring you up to speed with ESET. We've got quite a range of different people on, from resellers through to people that probably are end users that already know us. So I'm just going to quickly just bring you up to speed. Some of you will know a little bit more about this, and if you've been to any of the sessions beforehand, you certainly will remember big chunks of what I'm about to say. So if you could bear with me a little bit, that'd be great. So as in previous sessions, I'm not really going to take up too much of your time. And for those of you actually, if this is the first time you've actually seen one of Jeff's presentations, he's done. This is his third in the trilogy. The other two are available on YouTube, and I'll forward the information to you afterwards in an email, and you can go and see those at your leisure maybe over the Christmas break. I don't know. So I'm not going to take up too much of your time to say. So Jeff, for those of you who don't know, is a renowned investigative journalist and the author of the best-selling cybercrime book, crime.com. So as promised, each you will receive a physical copy of this book within the next 7 to 10 days. So hopefully in time for Christmas. If you've not already received one, if you attended before, then that's your copy. Sorry, but maybe for those of you new to us, as I say, within the next 7 to 10 days. So I want to take a few minutes though, just to bring you up to speed with ESET and why we're running these, we hope, fascinating and thought-provoking sessions. First thing first, who's ESET? So I say we've got a wide range of attendees today, so I'll try and keep this as relevant and succinct as possible for everybody on. First things first, we are a digital security company. We used to be an antivirus company, then we were an anti-malware company, but now we're digital security. This really reflects the expansion or proliferation of attack vectors, but it also sort of reflects the proliferation of attack surfaces as we, all of us, collectively embraced all the good things that internet-based and e-commerce has brought to the global economy. We are also 30 years in the industry. We were set up in Bratislava. I think the first iteration of our legendary anti-malware kernel, which is NOD32, was created, as all good software is created, in a bedroom in Bratislava in around 1987. It became ESET somewhere around 1992, and we've gone on from strength to strength, from strength to strength since then. Easy for me to say. We're privately owned still. The people in that bedroom still own the company. So, and what that really does, as we feel that's a strength, it's our ability to focus on creating excellent solutions and services and products, and not so much on having to appease shareholder returns. Clearly, we've got stakeholders, but they're not the kind of people that push us towards making profit rather than good products. And over that 30 years, we've actually grown into the largest European-based IT security company, another fact that not a lot of people are fantastically aware of. And we're the fourth largest company of our type, endpoint protection, in the world. We protect directly around 110 million plus users. It kind of goes up and down, but it's around there. And indirectly, somewhere north of 600 to 700 million daily users of Google through our app scanning and Chrome cleanup solutions. We're present in about 200 countries, just over now, worldwide, and we have 18 research and development and local and regional office centres around the globe. We employ just over 2,000 people, and approximately 40% of our employees are directly involved in research and development and intelligence. And finally, we have a wide portfolio of protection solutions. We have a consumer portfolio, all the way through to large enterprise, and all of the kind of solutions and services that you would expect of a large enterprise vendor. Or as I like to say, we protect everybody from Granny to Google. But moving on, What many people are probably less aware of, though, are our wider connections with intelligence agencies around the globe. We provide threat intelligence to and work closely with organizations with acronyms, GCHQ, FBI, CIA, other acronyms are available too, Interpol, Europol, and others regarding activities of organized criminal gangs and also malicious nation-state actors on an almost daily basis, in fact. It's fair to say, therefore, that we are a threat intelligence-based company. This intelligence, though, helps us to create solutions and services to stay ahead of these threats and help protect individuals and organizations from malicious and damaging activities. And so threat reports and threat intel feeds, we find, are becoming more and more important to a wide range of organizations, actually. And this is an area of expertise ESET is also able to offer. Of course, there are practical solutions that we provide. Our services, solutions, and products have evolved over time to become multi-layered to combat the proliferation of attack vectors exploited. And Jeff will be talking about some of those today, and has done in the last two presentations in some way. So these threat reports and intel feeds are yet another layer of defense and part of a wider portfolio of solutions. It's important that they are delivered by experts in the area. And with 30 years in the business, over 30 years, and with our links, I think we can say that we are just that. We're experts in this area. And so to the Art of CyberWar webinar series, really. So this is the final one of the year. Where does it all fit? Why Jeff's talks, I hear you ask? Well, to answer those questions, I'll just say this, really. We believe here in ESET that by understanding how certain breaches occurred, for example, we heard in the first of the series from Jeff how Sony was nearly brought to its knees due to an innocuous email, and similarly $1 billion is almost stolen from the Bangladeshi bank. We hope to help you understand how to prevent such occurrences in the future and add a further layer to your defenses in this multi-layered defense strategy, and that is knowledge. It could be argued that knowing more about your adversaries, or in fact our adversaries, is as important as deploying the right solutions to protect you from them. And this is again what the Art of CyberWar is trying to address. So I've already listened to Jeff's previous talks about Sony and Bangladesh bank heist. They're both fascinating stories. This is the first time I'm going to hear this particular chapter, which promises to be a bit of a wham bam kind of chapter. And I'm excited to find out how it all ties together. I'm sure you'll find it useful. I hope that it helps as you think about your future cybersecurity strategy. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jeff and the main event. Hi, Jeff. As I actually just hand over control to you, for those of you who were not able to attend, if you could just introduce yourself really quickly and regale us with the intriguing final episode in your trilogy. So let me just hand over control to you. Right, there you go. You've got it.
Good stuff.
One final thing before you crack on this, could you just go into the next slide there? One thing I just wanted to say was that we will be running a whole series of Art of CyberWar seminars in the new year, webinars in the new year as well. For those of you who are attending today, and also those that aren't attending today, in fact, I will actually be reaching out and letting you know the full list of those activities. Sorry about that, Jeff. Completely forgot that. Thank you very much.
No problem. That's fine, Steve. Thanks for that kind of introduction. That's really good. Great to be on the webinar again. As Steve says, presenting the final one of the three of the trilogy, which I feel is a sort of suitable, satisfying endpoint to the proceedings. So yeah, as Steve said, I'm Jeff White. I'm an investigative journalist, and I've covered cybercrime, mostly cybersecurity, for BBC News, for various other players, and so on. Oh, my slides are going slightly crazy there. Let's go back one. This was a book I put out last year called Crime.com, which, as Steve said, some of you will be getting in your Christmas stockings this year. It is basically everything you ever wanted to know about cybercrime, but were afraid to ask. It's all the fun stories, some of which will be very familiar to our ESET audience here, but hopefully told in a sort of quite exciting, quite compelling way, and perhaps some facts about those stories that you didn't know from behind the scenes in my investigations. The book was made into a BBC podcast series, which is called The Lazarus Heist, which went out earlier this year. And as Steve said, the first two sessions I've done about hacking of Sony and the hacking of Bangladesh Bank were both in that series, the Lazarus Heist, the podcast series. It was still on BBC Sounds and Spotify and Apple Podcasts, wherever you want to get your podcast. It is a good listen. It is a fun listen, though I say it myself, obviously biased view from me, but it's a good listen. It goes through all those things. But as Steve said, we're going to be coming on this final session to something that isn't in the podcast, but is in the book of the podcast, which I've just finished writing. And just to let you know, spoiler alert, I've just had the legal report back from Penguin's lawyers, and we've got the all clear, we're okay, which is kind of useful, because otherwise that would have been a bit of an issue. So hopefully the book's still on the cards for June next year. And this story I'm going to tell you is actually in the book, but isn't in the podcast. It's a bit of a sort of sneak preview. As Steve said, we are trying to follow along in the wake of Sun Tzu, who wrote The Art of War. And one of the more intriguing quotes I thought from The Art of War was this one: "To effect a retreat that cannot be overtaken, employ unmatchable speed." And what we're going to be talking about today is the unmatchable speed that North Korea's government hackers, the so-called Lazarus Group, allegedly deployed against 2 banking targets over the last couple of years. And perhaps more importantly, and on a deeper level, how those nation state hackers are increasingly starting to work with and work through organized crime and organized cybercrime. The linkages here get really super fascinating. And that's one of the fascinating things about North Korea as a cyber power. They are almost unique in the world for a lot of reasons. But in the government cybersphere, they're unique because, unlike a lot of government's hackers, North Korea's government hackers are after cash. They have a strong incentive to go after money because, for reasons again go into in the podcast and in the book, North Korea has basically hit the buffers financially. So the accusation is that North Korea's government hackers are going after cash, and that makes them unique, because if you think about those crossovers between nation state hackers and organized crime and cybercrime, North Korea are going to be at the top of that tree. They're going to have perhaps the strongest linkages between government hackers and organized criminals. And the story that I'm about to tell you goes into a bit of that. It's a story of the hacking of a bank in India, and it's this bank right here. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat today. I hope it's not anything to worry about. This bank here is called Cosmos Bank. You've almost certainly not heard of it. It's actually India's second largest bank. It started out as a cooperative bank. So these were set up around the turn of the century in India, turn of the 20th century, to provide financing for countryside farmers and that kind of thing. A lot of farming, obviously, agriculture in India. And these banks were almost sort of like cooperatives, sort of like credit unions, but over time have grown to be incredibly powerful and incredibly wealthy. And that's what happened to Cosmos Bank there. And of course, being powerful and wealthy made it a target for the computer hackers. And so this is what happens. The hackers broke in, they targeted the ATM system, the cash point system of Cosmos Bank. I've got a quick comment here. There we go. I wondered whether somebody was trying to get me to comment to say that they weren't hearing my audio, so I thought I'd quickly check that. So look, before we start this story, we have to kind of cover how ATMs work and how cash points work. So I'm going to go through that with you. Now, apologies, I know some people on the call might be experts in this and will know all this stuff. If you do, apologies, we've all got to get up to speed. But if you don't, here's a sort of quick flyover review of how those ATM systems work. So here is Sanjay. He's off to the cash point. He's going to make his withdrawal. And this is how the system works. He puts his card in. The first thing the ATM detects is the payment provider. MasterCard, Visa, the company's got the name on the back. RuPay, big one in India. And the payment provider says, okay, let's look at which bank it is. It gets the PIN and the bank ID. Which bank is this? The payment provider then says, this is a card that's been issued by Cosmos Bank. So let's punt it over to Cosmos Bank. They can take care of it from here on in. And the PIN and the amount of money that Sanjay's requested go over to Cosmos Bank for checking. And that's the first thing that happens, is the PIN gets checked by the ATM payment switch. Fancy name for the big computer that handles all of the ATM transactions. So it's going to look first thing at the PIN. Is the PIN okay? That unlocks the whole process. No PIN, no money. Is the PIN okay? Yes, okay. Next stage. How much money is Sanjay there requesting to get out of the cash point? And then the next thing the ATM payment switch does is it goes to the core banking system, which is the big ledger that keeps a record of how much everybody's got in their account and how much money they all have. Because once the request comes in, Sanjay there wants 2,000 rupees. Well, does he have 2,000 rupees in his account? So the ATM payment switch goes to the core banking system and says, please tell us, is there enough in the account? Checks the account balance, and then that's the next thing. Is the account balance okay? If the account balance is okay, if there's enough in the account, then the transaction goes back all the way along the process and says, yes, Sanjay has enough, etc., etc. And good old Sanjay gets his money and is off to a good weekend. That's how the ATM system works, roughly speaking. There's obviously lots of complexity there that I've slightly brushed over, but I hope you can forgive that for the brevity of the presentation. So here's what happens to Cosmos Bank. Around 2017 and into 2018, phishing emails start arriving at the bank's branches. It seems that some employees of the bank fell for these phishing emails. Hackers were able to break into the bank and they wormed their way through the bank systems, and they managed to get hold of the ATM payment switch, and they compromise the ATM payment switch. They take it over. So from now on, they control all of the ATM transactions coming in and out of the bank. Very powerful position to be in. So let's go back to the ATM picture. One option for the hackers is person puts their card into the ATM, the PIN and the bank ID go to the payment provider, it goes to the bank, check the PIN. You could just say PIN's okay. Regardless of what PIN he's typed in, you could just say PIN's okay, send back an okay, and he can withdraw as much money as he wants. That's one possibility. Okay, back to the cash point, and Sanjay gets his money. And what you could do as the hackers is you could say to people, if you've got a Cosmos card, just stick it in the bank, we'll approve all of the PINs, you can make as many transactions and withdrawals as you like, and we'll approve them all. That's one option for the hackers. The problem is, if you do that, if you're approving every transaction that goes to the payment switch, it's not just Sanjay who gets his money out regardless of the PIN, it's everybody. Everybody who puts in a Cosmos card into a cash point can mysteriously type in any PIN and get out as much money as they want. Well, that's going to raise alarm bells, isn't it? That's going to be very, very visible very, very quickly. The hackers don't want that. They want to target and narrow down their hack so that they're just working with their accomplices to minimize the amount of alarm bells that they ring at the bank. So here's what they do. They get hold of the details of 450 accounts at Cosmos Bank. Now, it's still not entirely clear from the story how they did that. They have access to the bank system, so they might have just randomly grabbed 450 people's accounts. The other option is that they actually got accomplices in India to go and set up accounts at Cosmos and set up those 450 accounts. However they did it, the hackers now have the details of 450 legitimate accounts at Cosmos Bank. What they did now with those account details is they coded them onto blank payment cards, which sounds very fancy and highfalutin, but actually isn't that difficult to do. So if you have a gift card, like an Apple iTunes card or a WH Smith's or a Boots loyalty card, on the back it's got the magnetic stripe. And you can buy a machine on the internet for a couple of $100 that you can wipe the card details from the magnetic stripe, so the gift card or the Apple payment details or whatever, and you can code on fresh details. So that's exactly what the hackers did. They sent out the details to the card holders, to the people holding the blank cards. They coded those 450 account holders' details onto those blank cards, and those blank cards effectively then become legitimate cards, usable cards connected to those 450 accounts. So those cards get put into the ATMs, the PIN and the bank ID get sent to the payment provider as usual, the PIN number gets sent to Cosmos Bank and the ATM switch. But of course, the hackers are at this point sitting on top of the ATM switch, so they can see all those transactions coming in. So what they do is they start filtering it out. For each transaction that comes in, for each ATM withdrawal, they ask, is this from one of the 450 accounts we compromised? Does this account details match one of the cloned cards that we've got out in circulation? If so, send back the okay, the PIN is okay. So what they've done is they've filtered their hack to just be the 450 account details that they've stolen. And that goes back to the ATM, the PIN is okay, that's great. It doesn't matter what PIN they've put in, it's just being approved just for those 450 account details. Next thing is the withdrawal request. Now remember, at this stage, the people who are putting those cards into the cash points and withdrawing the money are accomplices of the hackers. They've been given the account details by the hackers. They've created cloned card details, cloned cards with those account details. They're now going to cash point, sticking the cloned cards in. What they want to get out is as much money as possible, because of course, the affiliates of the hackers and the hackers themselves want to make as much money as possible. So the withdrawal request goes back to the ATM payment switch. Please give me 12,000 rupees or 10,000 or 100,000 rupees, as much as I can get. And this is where it gets a bit problematic for the hackers, because of course, the query has to be sent across to the core banking system. And at that point, the core banking system has to check the account balance. Now that's a problem, because remember, the hackers have grabbed 450 account holders' details, but the hackers don't know at any one stage how much is going to be in those accounts. So if they've grabbed 450 account holders' details at random and cloned cards with them, well, they don't know how much those people had in their account to start with. It might have only been 2 rupees. And even if the account balances look pretty healthy, at the same point the cloned card went in, the legitimate card holder could have made a withdrawal and pulled out all of their money. The hackers don't know how much is in those accounts. The other explanation for how they've got those 450 accounts, as I said, is that they sent their accomplices into accounts to branches of Cosmos Bank in India, and they created those 450 accounts. Well, that doesn't get the hackers off the hook either, because in order to make sure those 450 accounts have enough money in them, they'd have had to have got their accomplices to deposit money in that the hackers are then going to withdraw. It doesn't make any sense. It's giving with one hand and taking with the other. So this presents a poser with the hackers. As those 450 cards are put into cash points, and as the withdrawal requests are made, they have to somehow make the ATM payment switch think that the account has enough money in it. Bit of a poser. So they come up with an absolutely genius solution. They've got to send the ATM payment switch somewhere. They've got to send it to some account to check the balance. So they reprogrammed the ATM payment switch to query the balance that Cosmos Bank itself has with the Reserve Bank of India. Of course, being a national bank, Cosmos has a reserve account at the Reserve Bank of India, and it's got billions of dollars in it, and there's no withdrawal limit because it's Cosmos Bank's own account containing all that money at the Reserve Bank of India. So now when the ATM payment switch says, hey, let's query this account, let's find out if it's got enough in it to make the withdrawal request, the answer comes back, hell yes, it does. Of course it's got enough money in it. Of course you can have as much money as you want. And that message makes its way back to the cash point, and everybody who sticks those 450 cards in can withdraw as much as they want to do so. Pretty impressive, huh? Now, what's interesting is they send out those 450 accounts to get cards cloned. Well, where do they send them to? I mean, are these people in India who they're cloning the cards with? Are they people overseas? How does that whole network work? Well, we start to get an insight into that when we go to the next stage of the story, because of course, at this stage, all we know is some people out there with cloned cards have stuck the cloned cards into cash points and withdrawn money. What happens next is truly astonishing. There are $11 million withdrawn. That's in 29 different countries. There are 12,000 transactions made, and the total time it takes is 2 hours and 13 minutes. And it's absolutely astonishing. This is a coordinated blitzkrieg raid on the international finance system. I mean, one of the things I'm interested in is 2 hours, 13 minutes. That's really interesting. It's a really interesting time window, particularly when you start to find out which countries this happened in. It was Canada, the US, the UK, Turkey, the Russian Federation, Japan. Well, those are all in different time zones. So if you're saying it's 2 hours and 13 minutes window, if the hack starts, the withdrawals start, this coordinated cash out campaign starts at, say, I don't know, 3 p.m. in the US, that might be convenient for a whole bunch of people working with you in the US, but it's not going to be convenient for the people working with you in Japan. So they had to line up all of these different people to go out at all different times of day in their individual countries. And again, 29 different countries. How do you feed out those cards into those 29 different countries? How do you create that kind of network? The other thing that's fascinating about this case is it presented a real poser for the Indian law enforcement bodies investigating it. So this happened in Maharashtra state, which usefully has a very efficient cybercrime, very experienced cybercrime unit. You know, there's a lot of banks in Maharashtra state, so that, you know, the cybercrime cops know what they're doing there. But when I contacted them, they said one of the issues they've had was trying to get the paperwork across to these 29 different countries and to coordinate 24 and more countries, legal assistance processes, their law enforcement, just trying to get cooperation on that level from that many countries. It's absolutely astonishing challenge. And that, I suspect, is something that the computer hackers knew very well. The other thing that's interesting in my mind is you've now got dozens of blokes, usually blokes, hanging around in different countries who've gone to the cash points, who've stuck the cash cards in, who've got wads of money. We're talking about wads of money. Well, they're in Canada and the US and Turkey. And so how are they getting this information, this money back to the hacker? Are they using FedEx to send it back? How do those linkages happen? And so when I heard about the Cosmos Bank hack and I started investigating it, there was this really tantalizing aspect to it. Like, there's clearly something going on here. There's a network going on here. And it became all the more tantalizing when we started to work out who's behind the Cosmos Bank hack. According to the United Nations investigators and according to information that's been leaking out of the US government, the suspect, the key suspect behind that hack is this chap here, who I think we may have met in previous presentations in this Art of War series. That is Mr. Pak Jin-hyok. According to the US government, according to the Department of Justice, he is a key member of the North Korean Lazarus Group hacking team, the elite hacking unit who work on behalf of the North Korean government. The US released a 180-page indictment, a criminal indictment, a criminal complaint against Pak Jin-hyok back in 2018, September of 2018, and they linked him through a series of connections to not only the Bangladesh bank job, the Sony Pictures Entertainment hack, and the WannaCry ransomware attack from 2017, which we haven't featured in the series, but is equally fascinating, particularly from a cryptocurrency crime perspective. According to the US government, it was the Lazarus Group who committed all of those attacks. Now, what was interesting when the Cosmos Bank hack happened was that a couple of days before that, a post appeared on a website run by a guy called Brian Krebs, who, again, I'm sure many of you are familiar with. He's a real cybersecurity journalist. He actually does stuff, unlike me, who just talks about it. Brian Krebs posted on his website and said there was going to be, and this was a couple of days before the hack, there was going to be an infinite cash out operation that the FBI was warning about, that they'd received information, and was warning banks in the US and I think worldwide as well. It seems Cosmos Bank didn't get the message because that infinite cash out operation, unlimited cash out operation, seemed to hit them. After the attack, the US Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, the CISA, put out an alert about Lazarus Group, who they call an even weirder name, Hidden Cobra, and connected Lazarus Group, aka Hidden Cobra, with an cash out operation on a bank in 2018. Seems to me pretty obvious which one they were talking about. But here's an intriguing question. If indeed it is North Korea behind the hacking of Cosmos Bank, and if the hacking of Cosmos Bank involved making cash points in 29 different countries around the world spew out money, a so-called jackpotting operation, who was collecting the money on the other side? Was it Pak Jin-hyok and his North Korean buddies? Very unlikely. They're based in Pyongyang. They don't have the feet or the boots on the ground around the world to be going to cash points in 29 different countries, sometimes in the middle of the night, to collect all the money. There's got to be some network that the North Koreans, if indeed it is them, have been utilizing to make this cash out system work. And this was the intriguing bit. This was the bit that was just wiggling around in my mind that I thought I'd be fascinating to find out some details. And details is exactly what we've got, thanks to a bunch of subsequent prosecutions, again, by the US government. It seems that in order to make this cash out operation work, Pak Jin-hyok was working with this chap right here. That is a man called Caleb Alomeri. I went under the hacker name Big Boss. At a certain point in around 2018, the North Koreans were accused of getting in touch with Big Boss and recruiting him to help with this cash out operation, because Big Boss was up to his neck in cybercrime. He had a network of money mules who could help clone the cards, because obviously that's a job you need doing. Once you've stolen the account details from Cosmos Bank, you've got to clone the cards. Hey, Caleb can help you with that. He's also got a network of dozens of runners who are able, in countries like Canada and the US and elsewhere, to go out to the cash points to withdraw the money and to take the money out. He was the point person for the North Koreans' cash out operation on Cosmos Bank. And again, what this points to is the fascinating confluence between government hackers, nation state hackers, and organized crime, organized cybercrime. As I say, Caleb Alomeri was up to his neck in this stuff. And when the North Koreans needed somebody to go to, allegedly, he's the chap they picked on. And it was a lucrative little deal, because they didn't stop at Cosmos Bank. After the Cosmos Bank job, this was February 2019, they went after this bank here. That's Bank of Valletta. It is not only the second largest bank in Malta, it's also the winner of the Jeff White Award for Worst Corporate Headquarters Design. I mean, that really is just awful. I don't know who thought of that, what they were thinking. They obviously thought, yeah, let's go for, you know, 1920 steamship meets cement works. I think that was the vibe they were going for. But it is the second largest bank in Malta, despite their grim headquarters, and about half the island's money goes through that particular bank. This would become the next target for the Lazarus Group, according to investigators. It would also be another job for them with Khaled El-Ameri, big boss, and it would recruit somebody absolutely incredible to this little cozy cybercrime operation they had going on. So, Feb 2019 or thereabouts, individuals, staff members at Bank of Valletta start receiving emails like this one. Dear Sir, Madam, I'm writing to you from the Autorité des Marchés Financiers, AMF in Paris. That's the Markets Regulation Authority in France. Now, I've made up the contents of that email. I don't know what the substance of the email was, whether it was a link, whether it was an attachment, but what I do know is that emails of this type got sent through to Bank of Valletta, and that they came from these email addresses at amf-fr.org to addresses at bankofvalletta.com. Now here's the tricksy thing. That's the email address that the emails came from. That, of course, is the address of the Autorité des Marchés Financiers in France. Spot the difference? Well, it seems some folks at Bank of Valletta unfortunately didn't. Some employees of the bank, at least one employee, fell for the ruse, inadvertently clicked on the link, opened the attachment, whatever the sort of malware infection vector was, and got the bank infected. Now, this time, the hackers used a slightly different approach. They weren't going to use the ATM system. They weren't going to do that cash out operation again, because in a way they didn't need to. They had access to the bank's SWIFT software. And we talked about this in the previous session with Bangladesh Bank. SWIFT, for those who don't know, and I'm sure there are many who do, is the system, the international communication system by which banks send and request money to each other. So if you're into the SWIFT system, you can remarkably send a message to another bank saying, hey, we'd like to send or we'd like to receive this particular amount of money. And because SWIFT is mainly trusted between banks, those messages will often be acted upon, and that's what was going to happen next. So the Lazarus Group's hackers who were doing this, according to various investigators, including the United Nations, know that they're going to be able to transfer some money out of Bank of Valletta, and they're going to use a SWIFT system. But of course, for the SWIFT system to work, you need to have a recipient bank account. And let's face it, you can't just say, please send it to the account of Kim Jong-un, care of Chonggyeong Bank, Pyongyang, because that's going to get spotted. It's going to be obvious. What the North Koreans needed was a way to launder the money. They wanted to wash the money through other bank accounts before taking it to where they needed. So they went back to Khaled El-Ameri, to Big Boss, because they worked with him in the past for Cosmos. It worked out pretty well. And they said to him, do you know anybody who has these accounts, these bank accounts, that we can send the money through? Have you got any, bank account? Well, Khaled El-Ameri, Big Boss, didn't, but he said, I know a man who does. And it's this chap right here. That is a guy who goes by the name Hush Puppy. He is, or was, an Instagram influencer, which is a bizarre world. I don't know if you ever looked into this, in which people get money because they've got money, and that gives them more money. I have no idea how this world works. So if you looked at his Instagram feed, Hush Puppy's life consisted of waking up in his Givenchy pajamas, trotting down to one of his many supercars, Bentleys and rollers, sauntering around to lots of parties, being given lots of sort of free Versace type stuff, appearing at all these fancy events, hopping on his private jet, and living the lifestyle of the Instagram influencer. And for this, he was rewarded with even more free stuff, which he put on Instagram, which made him more money. What he's discovered is this bizarre thing, which is the world of the sort of meritless egotist. As long as you can keep it going, it works. It's like a sort of perpetual motion machine. The more famous you are, the more you get. The more you get, the more famous you are. But here's the thing with perpetual motion machines. The flaw in a perpetual motion machine is always, well, how do you start it off? Anyone can keep a perpetual motion machine going once it's going, but if you have to put in input to get it started, it's not a true perpetual motion machine. How did Hushpuppi get his start? Well, you know that old phrase, making the first million is always the hardest? Turns out that phrase has some truth in this case. Hushpuppi wasn't always Hushpuppi. He was born Ramon Abbas in Nigeria, where he'd been part of what are called the Yahoo gangs, who were gangs of scammers who would send out emails, usually using Yahoo email, to people saying, I'm a Nigerian prince, I've got millions of dollars, please can you help me do this? And the rest would unfold into the scams we're all familiar with. Ramon Abbas didn't stay at the level of a Yahoo boy in Nigeria. He graduated, he moved through Malaysia and then into Dubai. And over time, he shaped this persona of Hushpuppi, this incredibly wealthy chap who had suddenly all these advantages in life and had suddenly led this charmed life. And he said on Instagram, he said, what a wonderful life I lead with all these wonderful possessions that I have. What he was slightly less forthcoming about was where he was getting the money to fund all of this. Turns out behind the scenes, Hushpuppi was up to his neck in cybercrime and had been working with Halab al-Ameri. This was the link in the chain that the North Koreans needed. Halab al-Ameri didn't have bank accounts through which you could wash money. Hushpuppi did, because Hushpuppi and Halab al-Ameri had been working on cybercrime for ages. Hushpuppi had the accounts, and through Halab al-Ameri, aka Big Boss, he was able to send through details to the North Korean hackers to say, when you hack the money, please send it to this particular bank here. He lined up 2 bank accounts in Romania and Bulgaria. And from then on, the heist was on. These 3 between them managed to steal about $30 million from Bank of Valletta. The bank has subsequently clawed some of that back, it should be noted. But it's fascinating where that money all ended up. So it wasn't just Bulgaria and Romania. Well, apparently 800,000 pounds of it turned up in the UK, and certainly according to the National Crime Agency, it was sent to a guy in West Hampstead who went out to Harrods and Selfridges and blew a bunch of it on Rolex watches, then bought an Audi and a Jag. Now, what's interesting, according to those accusations, is the items bought, because let's face it, if you put on your Rolex watch and drive your Jag across the border, well, you've just taken what, £200,000 worth out of the country. So for money laundering, which is the allegation behind a lot of this, those goods, those fast-moving, transportable goods are quite handy. Now, in terms of the postscript to this, the chap on the right there, Hushpuppi, Ramon Abbas, has been found guilty in the US of various charges to do with cybercrime and to do with money laundering. Now, what's fascinating is how this all happened. The chap in the middle, Galeb al-Ameri, as I say, was based in Canada when they caught up with him. He was flying into the US, where he was arrested by US police. They then examined his iPhone and they found lots of links to Hushpuppi. They found Hushpuppi's Instagram account and they thought, oh my God, we've got the next link in the chain. Galeb al-Ameri, by the way, has been sentenced to 11 years in prison for his part in this. The US obviously wanted to arrest Hushpuppi, but he's in Dubai. How do you get over to, they can't just walk into Dubai and start making arrests. So the US got the help of the Dubai police, who did the arrest themselves. And if you've got a spare 5 minutes after this talk, I highly recommend you go to YouTube and you watch the Dubai Hushpuppi Ramon Abbas arrest, because it is absolutely astonishing. He is living at this time, Hushpuppi, in the Palazzo Versace, which is the Versace Hotel in Dubai, in a suite of rooms, which are then raided by a SWAT team. He's taken out, not in his Versace and Louis Vuitton blanket, as you see him there. He's taken out wearing a wrinkly t-shirt and some boxer shorts. There is also a fantastic Steadicam sweeping shot of his set of luxury cars. Clearly, the Dubai police wasted no money on making the video. It does look like a cross between CSI Dubai and a Fast and Furious film. It's a great watch. Hushpuppi is then extradited to the US, where he's found guilty over the last few months, still waiting for the sentence on Hushpuppi. But given that his colleague there, Galeb al-Ameri, got 11 years, it might be a similar sentence, maybe even more for Hushpuppi. What about the chap on the left, Park Jin-hyuk? Well, has he been indicted? Has he been extradited? No, because as far as we're aware, Park Jin-hyuk is back in Pyongyang, where he's beyond the reach of the US government's feelers. Now, what's interesting is North Korean government deny any connection with any of this. They actually deny the existence of Park Jin-hyuk and say he's a non-existent person. They say this is a smear campaign on the part of the US government to try and libel them and so on. But what I find fascinating is, I'm going to sort of wrap up with this now, is where this leaves us in terms of those linkages between organized cybercrime and government hackers. We've seen this time and time again. We've seen government hackers reach out to organized cybercrime to borrow their tools and borrow their tactics. And what's particularly worrying, I think, for the future is that it may get to the stage where we're not entirely sure whether it's a nation state or whether it's an organized cybercrime gang who've actually done this. So that's going to be interesting in terms of the forensic stuff. I'm going to hand back to Steve now. I think we might have some questions and so on. And also, I want to thank everybody for turning up, because I'm aware that there's a slight log4j issue going on, and you probably are all snowed under with emails for that. So appreciate you attending and look forward to your questions now. Thank you so much.
That's brilliant, Jeff. Thanks so much. Yeah, I didn't really think of that. There's probably quite a lot of people, although we've got a fantastic attendance today. So clearly somebody's maybe taking a few minutes out from sorting those problems out and thinking we'll have something a little less worrying to a little more entertaining to deal with for a few minutes. So, which is brilliant. So, and I encourage you, anybody, please, we have some questions here, but if you've got any questions to ask, please just chuck them into the chat there, and I'll try and get those to Jeff. But in the meantime, Jeff, we've just got a couple of questions here from people. It's interesting you talked about the gentleman over in North Korea, and that the US continues, if I'm not wrong in assuming that they continue to put charges out against North Koreans, with, I imagine, very little likelihood of them ever being brought to book. So why do they do that when they know they'll never appear in court, do you think?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and actually I forgot to add as a postscript to that, in addition to the Park Jin-hyuk indictment, there's now an indictment out against 2 other North Korean alleged members of the Lazarus group hacking team, and the story around those 2 guys and what they're alleged to have got up to, accused of getting up to, is even more astonishing. There's a whole cryptocurrency side of this which we haven't sort of covered. So the US do keep putting out these indictments. One of the crazy ones was they put out an indictment, I think it was an indictment, it might have been a criminal complaint or legal order, against, I think it was 140, no, it was 280 Bitcoin addresses. So these are now sort of criminal Bitcoin addresses. They're not even individuals. And you sort of think at that stage, why is the US government charging a Bitcoin wallet address? Well, what's interesting is, A, they're playing the long game. If those Bitcoin wallet addresses ever get used in any other crimes, ever get revealed as to who the beneficial owner of those wallet addresses is, well, the US government can look back in time and say, hey, hang on, we've got a warrant out against those. So you put your marker down because you don't know when that's going to pay off. Another factor of this is there's a diplomatic game going on here with North Korea. The US government's trying to pressure North Korea in lots of different ways. And putting out these indictments, which are still accusations, still to be tested in court, but putting these out into the public domain increases the pressure on North Korea. The US, when it lists North Korea's, wrongdoings, can say, oh, and by the way, look, there's still this indictment out against this guy. Look at all the crimes we've accused him of. It increases pressure on North Korea. But the other thing that it does, in addition to that, is that it allows the US government to shut down some of the Lazarus Group's infrastructure. So in the indictment, they list all sorts of tactics, tools, and procedures. They list IP addresses, social media accounts, virus names, virus types, and so on. All that infrastructure now is burned for the North Koreans. And you could say, well, they can set up new social media accounts, they can set up new malware. Well, yeah, they can, but it takes time. So every time you burn down your opponent's infrastructure, they have to build it back up again. I think there's a quote somewhere in Sun Tzu's Art of War about that, about destroying people's bridges and houses and that kind of thing. Waging war is about just ruining your opponent's ability to even get back on their feet and fight back at you. So again, there's part of that where the US is saying, well, the more we put out in the public domain, the harder the North Koreans are going to find it to strike back. And I have to say, for me, those indictments, those criminal complaints are really fascinating, and they really give a lot of detail that I can then use to sort of say, look, here's the story of the accusation behind the North Koreans. So yeah, that's broadly speaking the reason I think why the US government put them out. By the way, the US government have never deigned to do an interview for us, so I'm still hoping that we can get a chat with the FBI next time.
Yeah, maybe the next talk. You mentioned there about, I mean, in the 3, and certainly this one and the last one, basically taking cash. I mean, getting cash out of the wall or cash out of the bank. I think in the Bangladeshi bank heist, there was actually wads of cash in boxes being taken into limousines, for example.
Yeah.
But and you just touched upon it there a little bit more. I don't know whether you can expand on it. Where do you think? We want here. Where do you think the Lazarus Group and others will be going next, especially in terms of things like cryptocurrencies?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. They have expanded massively into that, as have a lot of cyber criminals. I mean, that's the boom in ransomware that we're all aware of that's still rolling across. And I think the really worrying thing about the Log4 issue is that may end up at ransomware, which is a slightly worrying conclusion for it. But that's all driven by crypto and the ability to get money out through crypto. And so it's really interesting to watch the sort of the allegations on the North Korean government's sort of push into cryptocurrency. So obviously, I mentioned WannaCry, the ransomware attack that disproportionately hit the NHS in 2017, or some would argue actually proportionally, because it was hit large, a lot, because it has a lot of machines. The money that was made from the ransomware attack actually wasn't necessarily that great. I mean, when you totted it all up at the time, it's a few hundred grand, that they made. Awful, terrible figures compared to the amount you would expect to make, certainly from the world's most, virulent form of ransomware. But what's interesting is that looking in hindsight, it may have been that was an experiment in laundering the money, because when we talked about the Bangladesh bank job, it took a year just to try and set up that system of laundering, to get it all in place, to launder the money. And through that laundering process, they actually lost quite a lot of money. If you look at the WannaCry thing, okay, they only made 100 grand, but it took them something like 48 hours to launder it, and it's never been seen since. Like, it's gone. It went into a cryptocurrency exchange called HitBTC, and it's traceable. I've traced it to HitBTC. Obviously, my next job as a journalist is ask HitBTC, where'd the money go, guys? They got back to me with a very anodyne comment about, oh, we've got strong controls in place to stop this sort of thing happening. And I was like, well, clearly it didn't. That didn't work this time. And the money just went. It's gone. And I think what the North Koreans and lots of other cyber criminals learned is, because this is brilliant, we can launder the money so much more easily. And since then, there have been multiple, as I'm sure a lot of our viewers are aware, multiple cryptocurrency exchange attacks attributed to North Korea. The amounts, if you add them all up, and again, these are accusations, some more firm than others, but if you add up all the accusations, it's more than $1 billion has been stolen from cryptocurrency exchanges that have been attributed, these attacks, to the Lazarus Group. So, you said, oh, in Bangladesh Bank, they didn't get away with it. As you said, it was an attempted theft of $1 billion. Subsequent to that, they've got the $1 billion. They did it by raiding cryptocurrency. And there was, during lockdown, yet another missile test by North Korea. These are always deeply worrying, these tests. The parts for those missiles have to be paid for by the North Korean government. And whilst we can't tie directly the $1 billion of cryptocurrency theft that went in with the X amount of money that was sent on the missile parts, all that money is going to a regime which is spending that money on missiles, on nuclear testing, and perhaps most tragically, not on feeding and clothing its people. So it all feeds into it, and this cryptocurrency boom has been a really interesting thing to watch. There's also more, there's constant innovations. I write about this in the book, about the speed with which every time a cryptocurrency exchange introduces a measure to stop, the hackers using the cryptocurrency exchanges, the hackers just work out a way around it. There's a brilliant story where the FBI is obviously trying to trace all these transactions, and they get a really good lead because they realize that one of the cryptocurrency exchanges through which the money's been laundered is one of the exchanges that asks for people to give their ID. So you have to sit there, I'm sure you've done this, you have to sit there with your ID and take a selfie with you and your ID and stuff. So the FBI is like, oh, this is brilliant. If we can get to the cryptocurrency exchange and we can get the photo of the person who set up the account with their ID where this money was laundered, bingo, we've got a money laundering account bang to rights. So they go to the exchange, they say, here's the Bitcoin wallet, give us the person's ID. The cryptocurrency exchange says, all right, here you go. They send it back, and it's a photo of a guy, South Korean guy, big spiky hair, holding up his ID, fantastic, we've got him, we've got his ID, we've got everything, brilliant. And then they request the details for another Bitcoin wallet, and they get another photo of a guy holding up his ID. This is brilliant, this is a bonanza. And then they start comparing the two pictures, and it's like, they're wearing the same t-shirt. That's weird. Despite the fact that two different countries, oh, actually his fingers are in exactly the same position. And it turns out that the North Koreans, as it's alleged, had been photoshopping digitally manipulating the heads on the photo's ID and on the guys themselves. And you just think, God, that's, whatever measures you put in place, there's always a sort of attempt to circumvent them. So anyway, sorry, wang on about that, but I do find all that stuff fascinating.
You've got a couple of, well, we've got one basically saying great presentation, thanks Jeff. So that's really nice. And we've got one. I've got a question here. Is the world, i.e., not the bad guys, doing anything to strike back? Is it always diplomatic, or is there an actual war going on?
It's really interesting, that question. Certainly the diplomatic stuff we know is going on because it's above the surface. You know, you see, it's been interesting. I mean, the Trump administration was, in North Korea, as in all things, totally unpredictable and insane, and operated a sort of almost split personality operation, where on the one hand, you know, trying to get friendship with North Korea, on the other hand, it was insane. So you can see all that diplomatic stuff on the surface. With the Biden administration, still seems to be bedding in as to what they don't like. North Korea, the Biden administration, they're not. I don't think they're going down the sort of chummy route, but they're still sort of working out what they're going to do about it. So all that diplomatic stuff you see on the surface. The cyber war stuff, as in, are the US hitting back at North Korea? That's more difficult because that will all happen below the surface. So after the Sony Pictures Entertainment hack, there was an outage in North Korea. So the internet went out for, I think it was several days. The issue with that is North Korea's internet connection is fairly small and fairly weak. So it's not unfeasible that somebody, you know, changed the BGP settings or something and North Korea's internet went down. It's not like, you know, everybody in North Korea was, you know, crying because they couldn't get to watch Netflix. And most people in North Korea don't have the internet, so the population wouldn't even know that. But that was pegged by a lot of people to say, you know, maybe this was a US retaliation for Sony Pictures Entertainment. As I say, it's difficult to know because there were other things that could have caused that. South Korea is the place supposed to look at with this, because South Korea is toe to toe with North Korea, and there have been attributed, you know, attempts by the South Korean government to strike back at North Korea and to take out infrastructure. So it's a bit of a Pandora's box that I think a lot of nations don't want to open publicly, because then you get into the issue of, you know, how is this legal, how is this fair, and so on. But certainly behind the scenes, it will be going on. And I think the US government would have absolutely no qualms about taking down a server that they know has been used by the North Koreans for cybercrime, and they can absolutely say, yep, that's a bad server, let's just take it out of action. I don't think they'd think twice about that.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you for that. We've just in case any more questions, I just have one sort of final question, really. We're coming towards the top of the hour. If you look back through the three presentations you've done, and if you've watched all three presentations as I have, or stories, then there seems to be a kind of a theme to it, in terms of how people get into these banks. I know there's a huge amount of organization and structure behind the whole thing, but what do you think, if there's one sort of thing that you would like the audience, if you like, to take away, what they should be maybe focusing on the most to try and prevent these types of crimes occurring to their organizations or to their clients' organizations? What would you say that is?
It won't come as a surprise. You know, I've got a revelatory thing to say, because it's the thing that still needs to keep saying, because it's still the hacker's key way in, which is email. And if you look at all of the stories we talked about, Sony, Bangladesh Bank, Bank of VALETTA, as far as we know, Cosmos, almost certainly Cosmos, it was all phishing emails. And I know that's it's a bit annoying that that's the case, because A, it's not a revelatory thing to say, and as a news journalist, I like to say things that are new. Also, I think for organizations, there's just this thing of like, oh, we still have to keep doing that, but we did that. We did phishing testing ages ago. I think as long as that's still the hacker's key way in, I think that's still the thing that you do. And I'm saying this, as I say, people are tearing their hair out about Log4j, and I know that's, you know, you've got so many things biting at your time. But for me, for my money, for the stuff I've investigated, there is almost no limit, I think, to the amount of education budget and staff awareness and user awareness you can put in. That's where I'd be putting my money. But I am intensely aware that I am not the person sitting at the sharp end watching the big screen of malware and looking at all the other stuff. But as I say, that's the side that I see, and so that's the side that I'm going to say. But yeah,
it's funny that you say that. Actually, I mean, you know, that the stats that keep coming out is 80% of all kind of breaches start off with an email and this kind of thing, and it persists. You know, and then what the breach is or what kind of attack there is thereafter, that's where the changes are, whether it's ransomware or RDP attacks and all the rest of it. But the first way in seems to be that. But it's funny that my wife is a teacher, and she phoned up the other day, and she said, everybody here is really angry about the fact that they've just received an email from the IT department, and it was a simulated phishing attack. I went, what do you mean it came from the IT department? He said, because it said IT-department in it. And I went, what was the email address? She told me. I went, it's a pen test. You've been phished. It's a phishing attack. And it was just funny that they were all up in arms about the fact we're too busy to deal with this stuff. It was just hilarious that, that's, it seems to persist in every company. They don't really seem to, and I understand it, but it's just an interesting aside.
I think you've got to be a bit careful with that as well. I know those phishing tests work, and that they are good to do. I think you've got to be a bit careful about not disgruntling your staff and your users so much. I think if you handle them in the right way, they're great. But I do worry, as you've said, that some companies, the staff almost feel like their time is being wasted, but almost like they're being sort of tripped over and sort of fooled and tricked by their employer. I think that has to be handled the messaging has to be handled in quite a savvy way. They won't object once they understand why it's being done, all that kind of thing. But if you're just sending out phishing tests and going, haha, you failed the phishing test, now you do this, I don't think that's going to result in better behavior. I'll be honest about that.
And then they were referred to an online training course, which really annoyed them afterwards for the people who clicked the link.
Exactly.
It was kind of counterproductive in some ways. But we've got no further questions here, Jeff. It's been absolute delight actually listening to these stories. I think they're brilliant stories. I'm looking forward to you joining us again in the new year in 2022 and regaling us with more of those kind of stories. I'm really looking forward to it. But if we've got no further questions from anybody, I'm going to wind up now and say once again, thank you very much. Have a great Christmas, everybody. Stay safe. Hopefully we can all get together over Christmas, and we'll look forward to seeing you all in the new year. Thanks once again. Take care, everybody.
Good to see you all. Thank you.
Bye-bye.